End.
Yes, Ms. Finesse.
Thank you, Your Honour. I call BAB.
Sorry?
BAB.
Will you take an oath on the Bible or an affirmation?
Affirmation.
Would you, excuse me, I'm sorry. Would you repeat after me? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat.
Thank you.
There's some water there if you'd like.
Right. Thank you.
You're known by the pseudonym BAB for the purposes of the Royal Commission,
That's correct.
and you made a statement dated the 12th of May,
I did.
and you have that with you.
I do.
Are the contents of that statement true and correct?
They are.
It'll be Exhibit 2814.
Thank you, Your Honour. I invite you to read your statement, sir.
Thank you. This statement made by me accurately sets out the evidence that I am prepared to give to the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. The statement is true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. I was born in 1964. I am currently 50 years old. I come from a large Catholic family in Ballarat East. I was one of 8 children. When I was growing up, Ballarat East felt like it was its own community within Ballarat. There were a number of prominent Catholic families in Ballarat East, and my family was one of them. Generally, these prominent families took up the first 5 or so pews in the St. Alepius Church, East Ballarat, and our family had its own unofficial pew. My parents were both quite active within the church community. Ever since I was a young kid, we often had Christian brothers and parish priests come to our place on Sundays for lunch. I started school at St. Alepius Kindergarten in Ballarat East. This was a co-ed school run by the nuns. I stayed there until I was in grade 2. In 1973, when I was in grade 3, I moved to St. Alepius Primary School in Ballarat East, which was an all-boys school run by the Christian Brothers. I was 8 years old. My grade 3 teacher was Brother Gerald Leo Fitzgerald. Brother Fitzgerald was a very strict teacher who often used violence to punish kids who did not obey the rules. We were a fearful class. Brother Fitzgerald was a very strict teacher who often used violence to punish kids front or down the back. I saw boys in my class sitting on Brother Fitzgerald's knee, and I saw him fondling and kissing them. I think many of the boys in the class would have seen this. At first, Brother Fitzgerald seemed to randomly choose boys to come up the front. After a while, I noticed that Brother Fitzgerald picked favourites. By this I mean he used to choose the same boy to sit frequently on his nap over a few weeks. After this, he chose another favourite, and the pattern seemed to continue. Brother Fitzgerald often asked the kids he chose to sit on his knee to stay in the classroom with him at playtime. My classmates and I sometimes spoke about the fact that a kid had been asked to stay behind, but we never discussed what this might have meant. In about autumn 1973, Brother Fitzgerald picked me to go and sit on his knee, but we never discussed what this might have meant. In about autumn, he said to me, "Can you stay? Would you like to come to the boiler room and see the elephant bones?" There was a rumour in the class that Brother Fitzgerald had these fantastic elephant bones in the boiler room. We all wanted to see them. The boiler room at St. Alepius was like a cellar. It was down a flight of stone steps, off to one side of the classrooms. It had a padlocked steel gate on it. The room was very, very small and cramped. It was also very dark. There was just one light on the wall. There were boilers in there to keep the heating going. When we got into the boiler room, I started looking round for the elephant bones. Brother Fitzgerald was pressed up behind me. He then told me that I needed to air myself. This is something Brother Fitzgerald would make the whole class do 4 or 5 times a week. It meant taking our pants off and standing there in our underwear. When Brother Fitzgerald told me I had to air myself, I took my pants down, as this was what I had been conditioned to do. I then felt Brother Fitzgerald put one hand on the back of my neck and push me forward. He slid down my underwear. I felt something enter my anus 3 times. I don't know whether it was his fingers or his penis. He then told me to stand up and pull my pants up again. Immediately after that, Brother Fitzgerald told me that I was never allowed to say anything about what had happened. At that time, I also felt that it was not in my own interests to actually tell anyone about the abuse. I'd already seen Brother Fitzgerald lose his temper a few times in class with students. If students did not obey the rules he had set down, he generally responded with violence. Mostly we either got the gat, which was a steel rod wrapped in leather, a fist to the side of the head, or an open slap across the face. I thought this would happen to me if I told anyone about what had happened. I also began to feel quite a lot of shame build up over the weeks that followed. It wasn't something that I wanted anybody else to actually know about. After the incident in the boiler room, things went sort of back to normal in the classroom. About 4 days later, while our class was doing work, Brother Fitzgerald called me to come and sit on his knee. I refused. I said no. After that, I started to get physical abuse from Brother Fitzgerald. It seemed to me that at any opportunity for any sort of infraction, Brother Fitzgerald would take me to the front of class and give me the strap for no particular reason. For instance, one time we had a maths test. Because maths was not my strong point, I got 9 out of 10 wrong. I was taken up the front and Brother Fitzgerald stood behind me. I was made to call out the answers I put for each of the sums, and for every wrong answer, he punched the side of my face. Another time during winter, Brother Fitzgerald asked us to write something one morning, and a couple of the kids complained about having cold, cramped hands. Brother Fitzgerald asked who had cold hands, and of course, I put my hand up, having just ridden my bike to school. I was the only one that was taken up the front and given 12 of the best across the hand to warm it up. This meant 12 straps across the open palm of my hand. There were lots of similar incidents. At this time, Brother Fitzgerald was picking on 4 or 5 other boys in the class in the same way. Like me, they were physically punished frequently for no particular reason. The assaults gradually lessened after time, and towards the end of the year, I was ignored by Brother Fitzgerald. But when those assaults were happening to me, I knew why. I was able to make the connection between the punishments and me saying no to going up and sitting on his knee, and potentially being taken down into the boiler room again. After Brother Fitzgerald abused me, he turned up at our house another 4 or 5 times. He used to ride his bike out. Sometimes he had a drink with my father, other times he had lunch with my family. I felt intimidated by the fact that Brother Fitzgerald could turn up at my home. I felt as though, even when I was away from school, he still had me in his grasp. He could still turn up and intimidate me in my own home. I also became aware that there were other boys who were being asked during class to stay in the classroom with Brother Fitzgerald at playtime. During playtime, I could see into the classroom. I could see that boys were being kept in by 1 or more brothers. Based on my own experience, I assumed these boys were not saying no, because it was always the same boys who were chosen. I suspected that those boys were being sexually abused. 2 boys in particular who seemed vulnerable were frequently asked to stay back in the classroom. I noticed they seemed to be having a difficult time of it through the year. I have struggled for a long time with the idea that at that time, although it sounds callous and heartless, I felt that it was much better it happened to them than me. When I was in about grade 5, I noticed that some kids in other classes were also staying back in the classrooms at playtime with certain brothers. As I was going to the playground, I sometimes saw boys sitting on the knees of brothers or being spoken to by brothers. Because of this, I became consciously aware that it was going on to not only kids in the grades below me, but kids in my grade and kids in the next grade. For the rest of my time at St. Alypius, I was never once assaulted or approached or molested in any way. I began to think that I was not getting picked on by other brothers because I had said no in grade 3. About 3 months after the event in the boiler room, we had a visiting priest come to St. Alypius to hear confession. I don't recall this priest's name, but I thought this would be my opportunity to actually talk about this and to say what had happened. During the confession, the priest asked me, "And what are your sins?" The first thing I said was, "Well, Brother Fitzgerald has done things to me." I remember there was silence for about 30 seconds, and then the priest said, "That didn't happen." When he said that, I realised that was going to be the position, and there was no point in me telling anyone else. I felt disappointed and sad that nothing was going to happen about it, and that those other boys would still be taken out by Brother Fitzgerald. From grade 3 until grade 6, I was an altar boy, as were most of the boys at my school. As an altar boy, I helped the parish priest and visiting priests at St. Alypius Catholic Church. I was often an altar boy to Father George Pell, who was our parish priest at the time. Father Pell also came round to our family home quite a lot over the next few years. There were many, many opportunities for me to tell Father Pell what Brother Fitzgerald had done to me, but I never did. I can't explain why. I stopped being an altar boy when I left St. Alypius in grade 6. I went to St. Patrick's College in Ballarat from Form 1 until Form 4. St. Patrick's was also run by the Christian Brothers. After Form 4, I told my parents that I wasn't going back to St. Patrick's. I went to a non-Catholic school instead. I did this because I could see the hypocrisy in the Catholic Church, even though I did not have the words to describe it that way at the time. It was obvious to me that to preach one thing and to do another and expect people to take that was not good. I never reported this matter to the police. After I became aware that Brother Fitzgerald was deceased, I really didn't see that there would be any point. I did not tell my parents about the abuse at the time because they were such an integral part of the Catholic community. We were a time-honoured Catholic Ballarat East family. I didn't want to shake my parents' faith, and I didn't want to devastate them. I didn't want them to know that they had put me in a position where this sort of thing could happen, even though I know now that they had no role in that. My father has since passed away, but I still haven't told my mother, mainly because I think there is still that element of being a victim and that shameful aspect that goes along with it. She is elderly, and I would not want to shake her faith. I think that once my mother has passed away, I will have conversations with my siblings. It took me another 30 years after I told the priest in confessional to be able to tell anyone else about the abuse. After I had been married for about 10 years, my wife realised I was having an issue and she asked me, "Why have you got this trouble?" I just sort of blurted out to her what had happened. My wife was quite shocked when I told her. After we talked about it, however, she could understand the reasons I had not told anyone earlier. We have kept it a secret from our families ever since. About 3 years ago, my wife could see that the abuse I experienced as a child was starting to affect our relationship. She persuaded me to seek counselling, which I did for the first time. I started getting counselling at the Centre Against Sexual Assault, CASA, in Ballarat. CASA later referred me to a psychologist in Ballarat, who I now see. I think that my actions of holding on to this internally have actually led to a psychological barrier, which now means that my marriage is almost collapsing. I think it's become more debilitating the longer it's gone on. I've withdrawn more, and it is to a point where it is really affecting my relationship with my wife. A few years ago, a counsellor at CASA told me that the Catholic Church had a process in place for victims to seek compensation, called Towards Healing. I had not heard about this process before. At the time, however, I decided not to go through this process or seek compensation. Looking back, I think there must have been a lot of adults in Ballarat East who knew what was going on at St Alepius for a long time. I believe this because it affected so many kids, and I think so many kids must have seen what was happening. I do not understand why it was allowed to continue for as long as it did. I would like the Catholic Church to officially recognise the child sexual abuse and officially apologise for it. There are a lot of people who are hurting and who deserve an apology. I would also like Cardinal George Pell to publicly acknowledge that child sexual abuse was committed by clergy and brothers under his watch as the parish priest in Ballarat East. I would like him to apologise for this.
No questions.
Does anyone else have any questions? No, thank you, Mr. BAB. Thank you for your statement, and you're now excused.